I'd like to end the program by introducing our speaker, Bill Weigel, PhD Professor of Math and Environmental Studies, taught at the University of Maine for 25 years. He's a member of Sustainable Seaside and a mainstay of KeepFtOrdWild, a community coalition dedicated to the preservation of trails, recreation, wildlife, and habitat on Fort Ord. I can understand why Dr. Weigel was on the 1972 United States Olympic team as a race walker. He won the 72 and 73 50-kilometer championships, U.S. National. He twice competed in the 100-mile endurance run, Western States Endurance Run, through the Sierras from Squaw Valley to Auburn, California. He also bicycled 4,000 miles solo and self-supported across the northern tier states in 1999. I used to bike in 1999, but not like that. And he hiked rim to rim across the Grand Canyon. He obviously hikes and cycles regularly on the Fort Ord land and is passionate about them. Please welcome Bill Weigel, and he will talk to us about it.
Thank you, Beverly. Before I get started, if I don't make a couple of announcements right now, I know I'll forget them, so I want to make sure I make them. First of all, I'm representing KeepFtOrdWild, KFOW, and I want to point out that the comments I make will, for the most part, represent those of we have this unofficial steering committee of 8 people. We meet semi-regularly and discuss all the important issues around Fort Ord. All of us are avid hikers or bicyclers out there. We know most of the trails. You could drop us anywhere out there and we would probably find our way back. 2 members were able to make it today, and I'd like to introduce them so that if you have some questions, particularly afterwards, you can ask them as well as me. We can all answer your questions. If Gordon would stand up for just a second, Gordon Smith and John Hutcherson. They've both been they've been out there longer than I have, since the 1990s. In fact, I think some of them were probably hiking and bicycling and traveling out there before the Army left, if you can believe that. So these trails have been there a long time. Also, Gail Morton, who you heard from earlier. Maybe you'd like to stand up again, Gail. I'm sure Gail could answer all your questions, too. She is with Fort Ord recreational users, in addition to running for City Council in Marina. So she can answer your questions, and particularly if you have questions on, you recall what happened a year or so ago with Monterey, Salinas Transit, Whispering Oaks, that area. She's intimately familiar with that. And then there's someone who I've never met, who I hope is here, but I want to introduce her. Her name is Pam Crone Davis. I thought that was you. Pam has done a wonderful paper as a grad student, right, at CSUMB, studying the area, the approximately 600 or 700 acres of the Monterey Downs area, and has studied it pretty extensively. So if you have questions about what's on that area, she would be a good person to talk with about that. The first thing I want to do is start with the photo album, because I think there's no better way to get a feeling for what's out there than to see lots and lots of pictures of people that use it, how they use it, and I think you'll see that probably every one of us here could find some good reason for going out there and using the land. So it's a photo album, and here are a couple comments I hear frequently since I've been hiking out there for 8 years, very regularly myself. One is people say, it's a wilderness in our own backyard. And I think if you can find the time to get to 8th and Giggling on Fort Ord, you'll see on a map where that is, or out on Inter-Garrison Avenue, you won't have to walk more than about 100 yards and you'll say, my gosh, it really is a wilderness. And the other thing that a guy I see running with his wife all the time says, it's a paradise for all kind of recreational users. So how many people have been out there and had a chance to hike or walk or bicycle, take pictures? So it looks like close to half. I hope the rest of you will be able to go out there too, and maybe those of you that have been out there will be able to grab someone that hasn't been and take them out. I think they'll find it quite enjoyable. So I'm going to quickly go through pictures here to give you an idea of what's out there. Lots of gorgeous oak trees, trails. This is called single track like that, some gravel roads. Great place for walking your dogs. This is an old hay rake that dates back at least 100 years. Just great places to do photography. Lots of bicyclers, both off-road bicyclers and trail bicyclists. It's a great family-friendly place, particularly one of the 3 specific areas out there. We have these nice paved, safe roads where there's no traffic, where families can go with their young ones, with their dogs. Students from CSUMB use it, faculty out there. That's Kay Klein there. Huh, what do you know? A great place to run with your dogs. Lots of trails. It's mountain biking heaven out there. There are even trails there called Little Moab because you don't have to go all the way to Utah to have the thrill of riding trails like people like there. And it's a great place for road bikes also. Horses, we see lots of equestrians out there. It's a great riding area. And I love the story behind these folks. I think he said he was a captain in the military, in the Army in the 1960s. And he met her, and as they're courting, he would take her for rides on the back of his motorcycle. And then finally they got married, and now they've slowed their transportation down just a little bit. Now this really blew me away when I saw it. That is basically, looks to me like a dog sled on wheels. So when I asked him, I said, "Are you training for the Iditarod?" He said, "No, I'm just out here having fun." So, and this is up at a beautiful area called Machine Gun Flats. Thank you, Gordon, for this wonderful picture of an 8-holer left over from the time of the military out there. And here, I don't know if you can tell, it's actually 2 horn toes, right? Horny toes. Here, shortly after the Fort Ord National Monument sign went up, we got a picture in front of it. This is some trees that were cut that nobody seemed to know why they were cut. There's a beautiful area back here, but boy, they sure heard about it. This is pretty interesting because it shows you one of the steps in producing a clear cut before we get development. This area right here looked like this. All 15 acres. In fact, I have a little presentation out there. You can look at it on your way in called The History of a Clear Cut. So about 1,500 acres, and at the same density of places like MST, it was probably about 1,500 coast live oaks were cut down there. So, great place to hike. Here's a little kid playing with an insect and carrying flowers. Seems quite appropriate. Another family out there. We have a friend who has, I swear she's befriended the bobcats out there. And she's done presentations for us on nothing but bobcats with great close-up pictures. And now she's sort of a semi-official bobcat photographer out at Fort Ord. And she goes out there and takes pictures. Every now and then you run across a deer kill. Here we see the antlers. I believe this is probably mountain lion because of the way that neck is broken. Actually, our group used to meet out at 8th and Giggling in the fresh air, and here we had 8 of us here, and we invited Bill Monning to come and share with us, and we talked with him about our concerns out there. It's a beautiful lake called Mud Hen Lake. Here's a peloton, a bunch of racers. The racers use this not just for the Sea Otter Classic, but there's a whole series of races that go on out there, both on and off roads, and they use almost all of the area out there. Rattlesnake, I've seen about 4 so far this year. You can see his rattles, and then this is another one. He didn't like me getting too close. This is Gordon's dog, Toby, enjoying a pond, and here he is enjoying the wildflowers, the same wildflowers we can enjoy in the spring, by the way. I like this picture because it clearly points out the fact that we have both roads for road bicyclers, and we have wonderful trails out there running side by side. So whatever your preference is, you can do it. And it's important to realize you can't go every place in Monterey if you want to do off-road bicycling. As far as I know, there are really just two main places, and that's Fort Ord and Toro Park. So we certainly don't want to lose that asset. More trees. If you get out there with just the right light, the trees are just absolutely gorgeous. These are a couple of coyotes taken from a distance. A couple of women running out there. And one of the things that Kathy, the wildlife photographer, said to me, that she feels that the trails out there, she calls them single woman friendly, because she says she just never feels any hesitation to go out there by herself, way out into the wilderness, because she feels it's so friendly and safe out there. More bicyclers at 8th and Giggling, a peloton. This is on a road that, by the way, if all the development plan goes in for Fort Ord, you won't be seeing trees here. If they can even ride here, it'll be between houses and other development. This group is there with the search and rescue. They're fortunate that they have this incredible area out there where they can train their dogs. They're up around where the horse race track would go in. Another bobcat. Nice close-up of a coyote. I'm glad I'm in front of this guy. Deer peeking his head out. This is a bench that was put up, I think, about 6 or 8 months ago, looking out over parts of Fort Ord from a little bluff that you can easily walk or bicycle to. And this is just some of the view off in the distance after a snowstorm. This is up in, I think it's Toro Peak up here. So now we're up in some of the higher country, the currently open BLM land. And the thing to notice about this is you notice there aren't quite so many trees. This area is really distinct from the area that we want to preserve, known as Happy Trails, which I'll show you in a little while, and totally distinct from the area that was used for ordnance that's been pretty much bombed to pieces, I guess. So just some more views of trails up there. The other thing to notice is that this is pretty steep. This is more, I would say this is an area for advanced mountain bicyclers. I don't think you'll go there if you're a beginning mountain bicycler. This is for the more advanced. So we have something for everybody out there, including the photographers, of course. This is Mud Hen Lake again with a nice single track trail here. Now, just so we know exactly where Wild Fort Ord is, or where Fort Ord is, it's easy not to know it's there if the main way you go by Fort Ord is on Highway 1, because you're more likely to see the development and the blight going that way. So let's zoom in here a little bit. Here are the Monterey cities, Marina, Seaside, along the peninsula. Then we come over here to the airport, Delray Oaks, come up Highway 68, where of course we know there's development, and then Salinas. So what you see then is that this area of Fort Ord, or it should be former Fort Ord, which I'll zoom in on here, is really encircled by cities, by the population. And for the longest time, many of us thought, wow, this is so great because it's like the Sky Islands of Arizona. They're surrounded by something that's totally different and served as a de facto regional park for all of us. This is an area I did this about 2.5 years ago, the contiguous undeveloped Fort Ord. I just simply went to Google Earth and drew a line between the development and what wasn't developed. And if you look inside here, you'll see it's basically not developed. Then we have inside this contiguous undeveloped land, we have the BLM lands, and then we have the ordinance area where access is denied. So this area is fenced off now, and we can't use it. It's unclear to what extent we may be able to use it at some point in the future, and I guess it depends on how well they can clean it up. And at least from people I've talked with, it seems like it's an unknown right now, how clear it's going to be. The currently open land has about 7,200 acres here and here. The currently designated ordinance area is about 7,450, and this Happy Trails area up here, which now is not protected at this point, is about 3,500 acres. This is currently under FORA-ESCA cooperative agreement for them to complete and certify the munitions cleanup. The green then is the current national monument, and this we hope will be in the national monument if and when closed. It's important to realize, though, that these are like three distinct areas. I've taken a page from the Fort Ord reuse plan here that shows where the oak woodlands are, and you can see the most contiguous, extensive area of oak woodlands is up here in the Happy Trails area that we hope to see preserved. The impact area has almost none, and the national monument has some areas of it. It's mostly grassland, few trees, long and steep hills. So this is like, if you think of it in terms of hiking and bicycling, this is for the advanced people, and over here is for the beginners. This has been called Happy Trails for a long time, and I understand the reason it's called Happy Trails is because people feel happy when they get out there and have a chance to bicycle or walk or take pictures or whatever they may choose to do, have picnics. And I want to point out, you can clearly see here, if you're familiar with looking at terrain maps, that this is very hilly grassland here. This is also very hilly, but there is a little more vegetation. Over here is the mostly treed area, and here, of course, is the ordnance area. So our vision, Keep Fort Ord Wild, is that we would have this Happy Trails added to the National Monument, extend the National Monument to include this. Now, it's nothing unusual. It's been done to many national monuments. The National Monument gets created, and then it makes sense to add land to it. We think it really makes sense to add this land to the National Monument, and I'll give you some reasons why in a few minutes. So our vision then of the Fort Ord National Monument would be that it would include everything it does now, and including this land, which is undeveloped. The benefits of an extended national monument include, first of all, it would guarantee access from all the cities and CSUMB, which would not be very easy to do if it's developed, and I'll show you that in just a minute. I'll show you also that recreation, outdoor recreation, creates jobs. It's been pointed out to me that there are a lot of physical, psychological, and therapeutic benefits to being able to use land like this. And for some living examples, well, I'll give myself. I've had 2 half-knee replacements now, and I can go out there and hike and bicycle. And one of the reasons I can do it so comfortably is because it's not all paved. I don't have to walk on concrete or asphalt. We have nice trails that we can walk on. Joint replacement, we have people out there who have had heart surgery, and particularly for veterans coming back from overseas, Gordon could tell you from personal examples, it's a great way to deal with PTSD. And sometimes medications and some of the other methods don't help nearly as much as being able to get out and enjoy areas like this. It will maintain and enhance the access to the Fort Ord National Monument for all directions. We'll save coastal oak woodland and the habitat for all those animals you saw pictures of. We'll minimize the need for water. For gosh sakes, we certainly don't have excess water around here. If this becomes part of the National Monument instead of all the development that people want to do, that's water we won't need. It would preserve this Happy Trails area in perpetuity, as it's clearly not right now. We got national promotion from it. If you go to Google, do an online search for national monuments, you can see a list, state by state, and Fort Ord comes right up there with great pictures. So we get promotion for our area. It attracts international visitors. I'll talk more about that in a couple minutes. It'll preserve our recreational land for local users. It will force some of the development off of the undeveloped land. But not only will it force it, it'll make that undeveloped land so much more attractive because people will want to live near a national monument for all the benefits that come from being in such an area. It allows CSUMB continued access for classes and recreation. I didn't say this, but it won't encourage gambling by students either. And it would boost the local economy almost immediately. We wouldn't have to be waiting for 10 years or whatever for the development that we're promised. As soon as it becomes known as a recreational area and more people come for recreation, recreational businesses will start to develop. Outdoor recreation is a big business. This is a report that was done recently by the Outdoor Recreation Economy. They point out it's big business to the tune of 6.1 million direct American jobs, $646 billion in consumer spending, $39.9 billion in federal tax revenue, $39.7 in state and local tax revenue. So this is big business. We're not talking about just a few people going out there and enjoying themselves without any economic benefits. Here's a nice graph that shows that outdoor recreation is an economic giant. This is the annual consumer spending in billions for 7 different types of businesses. It's not too surprising that outpatient health care and financial services are very high at the top. But look at this. Outdoor recreation is a close third behind them and outpaces all of these others. So, proposed developments for out there would really diminish the national monument, and I want to show you what some of them are, and I want to use maps. So many talks we have, unfortunately, don't use maps, and we don't even know what they're talking about half the time. I believe in maps. East Side Parkway, MST Whispering Oaks, East Garrison, Inner Garrison Business Park. I'm talking about these 3 together because right now they're being proposed for development together. So until that changes, it's not appropriate to talk on them as separate entities. The MPC training facility. So here is the East Side Parkway. Now recall, this is the national monument here. Ordinance area. This is the Happy Trails area we want to preserve. And what you can see is a road going through here cuts all of this area off, including the habitat for animals and also recreational access from this area. We see the MST Whispering Oaks parcels. You might say, why are you still talking about that? Because haven't we already killed the development there? Well, we may have killed MST Whispering Oaks, but we have not preserved that in perpetuity yet, so we still need to be considering that. East Garrison 2, well, you can clearly see where East Garrison 1 is. By the way, there was an awful lot of clear cutting done here and leveling of land. This land is not flat out there. Sometimes people treat it like it's flat, but in parts of it you get up to over 700 feet in elevation, some you get down to well under 300 feet. So it's important to realize that they not only had to clear cut this land, but a lot of it had to be bulldozed flat, and that's what would happen to some of the other land too. Anyway, if once this is developed, the plans right now call for something called East Garrison 2. Right now there are some bunkers up here. The rest of it is totally undeveloped. Then we have the Inner Garrison Business Park. Probably haven't heard of that, but it's about 74 acres here. You can pretty clearly see it's covered in trees. The East Side Road goes through it. We have this Monterey Downs Endowment Parcel Veterans Cemetery. As I said, I'm including those together because the current proposal includes them. So here's the Monterey Downs. You can see it's quite large. You can clearly see there are lots of trees here. And if you want to know how many and know some more details, please talk with Pam Crone-Davis afterwards. Maybe she'll give you a copy of her paper, although I think we have it on our KeepFtOrdWild website now, if you'd like to see it. This is an endowment parcel you hear so much about that's linked to the Veterans Cemetery, which is down here. The Monterey Downs plan, I think it's important to talk about this because it's about 550 acres, and the important thing to realize is a large percentage of it, about half of it, is covered in coast live oaks right now. Right now there's no development there. So here's what's planned. This is all housing. All the trees would have to come down. It would have to be clear cut. Up here we have a 1-mile horse racing track. This is all parking. Here's an arena supposed to seat up to 6,500 people. Here's some affordable housing. I believe these are horse stables over here. Here's a country walk. And then a horse park over here. So you can see outside of land which is required to be preserved that it's going to have to be clear cut. Even when you see trees here, this will have to be new growth. If you've been following the issue about cutting trees at the leprechaun's pipe, they call it, this is where they plan to clear cut the trees unless we can stop them. So those will have to be new trees there. Also notice, anyone who's hiked out there knows there are no ponds out there on this site right now. None at all. Not even any vernal ponds, the kinds that just show up after the heavy rains of the winter. But look what we have. We have 2 big ponds here. Golly, I wonder where the water is going to come from that. Then we have the Monterey Peninsula College training facility, which is here. So you see this pretty much covers most of the happy trails, and then there's land over here that's owned by CSUMB. What are some of the effects of these developments? I put this sequence in because it shows pretty much what the sequence is like. You cut down the trees, then you have to reduce them to chips, then you have to flatten the land, and then you get the development. So it'll destroy and fragment the coastal live oak woodland habitat for animals and plants. This is the oak woodland areas as in the FORA plan, figure 4.4-1, done in 1995. So this is 17 years old. So we know these trees have been here for at least 17 years. If we zoom in on it, you can see that the development, which I showed in the last slide, cuts right through all of the coastal live oak areas, in essence fragmenting it and destroying the habitat. The developments will diminish or destroy the coastal BLM connection, access to Fort Ord National Monument for Marina, Seaside, and CSUMB, the trails and the happy trails, also called Parker Flats area, and the sense of wilderness. So what I've done here is those developed areas I've put in red to make it more obvious. Here's the access corridor. This is figure 3.6-1, by the way. I'm not making this up from the FORA plan. This is the access corridor that was set aside or indicated for the Dune State Park to BLM. You can see there are at least 3 different things affect that. The MST Whispering Oaks development, the Intergarrison Office Park, and the East Side Road. And I'm sure Gail could talk with you much more intelligently than I can on that if you have questions. Access points cut off. These are the 5 main access points that have been established for use at Fort Ord. These 2 are great because they give you access to the current national monument. However, you better be ready to climb steep hills or bike steep hills if you go there. So these are the ones that are really friendly to the people, those of us locally, people from Seaside, some of the housing areas out here, for CSUMB over here, and for people of Marina. You see, those will virtually be cut off by the development. Trails lost. When I hike with my GPS unit, and then when I first started doing this, I'd come back and download the trails into Google Earth. Kind of a silly habit I have. But anyway, what I want you to see, and I haven't covered all the trails, here are some of the trails, and you see they're obliterated by the development. And what I did here is I took all the trails off because I wanted you to see all these little white squiggly lines you see here are either gravel roads or trails. Now, one of the interesting things about that is these trails have been preserved since the Army left. Now, how do you think they got preserved so well? Because they're being safely used by all of us. Those of us who live really close to it in Marina and Seaside, this is where we go for recreation. This shows you the acres of city park per 1,000 population. So if you have high numbers, it means you have lots of park space. If you have low numbers, you have very little. You see that in Seaside and Marina, the 2 closest areas, we have very little park space. If you had to get a lot of exercise, you know, some of the current recommendations, walk a couple miles a day or so many minutes. If you were to go to some of our city parks, you'd have to be walking endless circles around that, or you'd have to be walking on concrete or asphalt. Whereas, as long as we preserve this land, we have nice parks to walk to. The sense of wilderness would clearly be lost. As I pointed out, you start walking from one of these trailheads, these access points, and you immediately feel like you're in the wilderness somewhere. Why will it be lost? Well, we'll lose the oak woodlands and the associated habitats, so we probably won't see the flora and fauna that we could now see. The noise, I mean, think about this. You'll have an East Side Parkway. You would have the noise from the streets. If you have a horse track, there could be loudspeakers while training's going on. There's an arena there. There are events. They're talking about up to 60 events per year. That's over one a week. The MPC practice roadway where you can practice the fast car driving, and there's a shooting range there. And then the inner garrison roadway, they're expecting more traffic if all of this happens. And then the business park, of course, would have more. So there won't be any sense of wilderness unless you can somehow get way over there to the existing national monument. The other thing that those of us who use it really recognize is that we'll lose family and handicap-friendly and safe paved venues. Here you see some people. This is on Giggling Avenue, also on 8th Avenue from 8th and Giggling. Notice that we have families, they're using it safely, and this is gently rolling hillside. You don't have to climb steep hills. So the effects of the developments, among other things, that would compete with development elsewhere that's already vacant, or it's entitled, or it's planned, or perhaps it's needed. In other words, we don't really need development out there. We've got plenty of other development either existing or planned. Destroys natural beauty. So where do we go from here? Well, I think we all need to realize, as some have said it so eloquently, the national monument is a game changer. It's not the same area anymore. For a long time, this was a de facto regional park, and we'd go out there and talk with people, and they're come from Salinas, up near Aptos, north of here, south of here. I spent several weekends out there just talking to people about where they came from and counting the number of people, and I was counting on an average, this was a year and a half ago, 400 people a weekend coming to just one of those access points. The Bureau of Land Management says they're getting over 100,000 visits a year. So we're going to be attracting visitors from around the county and around the world. And I want to tell you an anecdote. I have to show you my hat. I remember when Tom Moore was here, he had two hats that he showed you. I have two hats also, but I forgot one. Anyway, this is my volunteer hat. I've served for 4 months as a volunteer at a little national monument, Chiricahua National Monument. Has anybody ever heard of Chiricahua National Monument? Oh, that's great. Yeah, you've heard of it from me. But I served as a volunteer host at the campground and a volunteer to drive people up to where they could do this long hike downhill. What I learned from talking with people there is I'll bet 1/3 of our visitors were from Europe and other foreign countries, and probably 1/3 of them were from states other than Arizona. They're from all over. In fact, one of the reasons we get so many people from Europe is that they say, you guys are so lucky because you have all this space you can use for recreation. We don't have it over there. So they come over here. How do they find out about it? Well, they have people that write guidebooks there. You can actually go to bookstores and local areas where they sell tourist supplies, and you can learn about the places to go. And you can learn a whole tour to do. One of the things that surprised me was when I was asking people, would you ever get down to Big Sur and Monterey? Most of them said no, because they wanted to head to the parks. So they would head over to Yosemite and other parks and then down into the southwestern U.S. So we feel that our land use decisions have to reflect this new reality. That we now have a U.S. and a worldwide presence. We need to insist that the open space and recreational provisions in the Fort Ord Base Reuse Plan are adhered to and not ignored. We need to protect open space for recreational use. We need to demand that public access to our public lands be increased and not decreased. Some of you maybe saw this article in the paper today. Advocacy group sees sharp rise in obesity in 2030. We're going to have more need for recreational space, not less. The last thing we should be doing is eliminating our access to venues where we could enjoy these activities. I say enjoy them, that can also help us to stay healthier. We have to make sure we inform and involve more people in our efforts to keep Fort Ord wild by expanding the National Monument. All of us give as many talks as we can. We network with our friends to make sure we know what's going on. We do everything we can to try and keep the public informed and involved. That's one of our goals. We feel public empowerment is important. We really believe we can make a difference. Those of us in the room and those of us we're in contact with can make a difference in this area we live in. Here are some things we've already done. We joined together to promote the creation of the new National Monument. Now, I'm not saying we, Keep Fort Ord Wild, did it. It was a coalition of people all over this area who realized the incredible benefits we have for having this land as a national monument and to have it as a recreation area that we can all enjoy. We've spoken for the open space corridor between the Fort Ord Dunes and the National Monument, and we've actually saved a mile-long segment of that by, and I imagine a lot of you signed our petition, led by 4U and Land Watch. Is that Amy back there? Yeah. Collecting 1,800 signatures for a referendum. 18. Well, I did that on purpose. And we are more or less rallying the troops and speaking out whenever and however we can, because we believe that public awareness and public speaking out is incredibly important if we want to live in an area that continues to be as beautiful and as wonderful for all of us as it is now. So we're hoping that you'll help us work together to create this expanded Fort Ord National Monument. And I encourage you to start thinking what you would like to do to help in any way you can. Talk with us. We'll be glad to give you ideas. You can probably come up with ideas of your own. We have lots of suggestions on the Keep Fort Ord Wild, on the 4U website and other places. Safwat.
I have a question. How does the vote of Fort Ord forward last Friday impact the three parcels that are tied together right now?
So the question I think Safwat is asking is this, that currently, as I pointed out earlier in that map, a Monterey Downs, the endowment parcel, and the Veterans Cemetery are tied together. The City of Seaside asked for clarification on, has to do with their EIR and their going forward, making sure they're not in violation of the base reuse plan. That discussion came up last Friday. And then at the end, close to the end of that 4-hour meeting, I think this is fairly accurate. Bill Monning and Jason Burnett, you all know, okay, offered a suggestion for a way to disconnect those parcels so they could all stand on their individual merits. And as far as I know, that's an ongoing concern right now. And there are probably people in the room who know more about it, would be delighted to talk with you on it. But I don't feel comfortable talking about it anymore because I don't know that much more. Yes?
Could you go back to the map and show us where the 3,000 other units have already been approved? Like,
oh, in Marina?
Yeah, Marina, yes. Because that, I mean, there are already 4,500 units that have been approved.
While you're going back, would you also be able to show on the map where the blighted areas are? Because the League, among others, feels that the blighted areas should be developed.
The blighted areas, you can see this building, concrete, all of this area. It already, some of it has already been redeveloped. The Dunes Shopping Mall, the Wellness Center, the new facility where Foro's offices are, and that's in the Marina section. But if you look and go towards CSUMB from the ocean side, that's where you see just acres of concrete dilapidated buildings. Many of those are within the city of Marina boundaries. Much of it is still on CSUMB, and some of it is in Seaside. So, but Fora, they have paid all the money that they're going to pay for the removal of the blight. So the existence of Fora was being challenged because Ford has no more responsibility for removing blight. The individual jurisdictions do, and they are waiting for development, because the development money is what will remove the blight. CSUMB is a different funding source.
Gail, isn't that part of the original business plan that you would put the clean development in first, and then when that generated revenue, then you would clear the blight?
That has been the policy that we are all watching. That's why MST Whispering Oaks was happening. Was that it was cheaper, and Michael Houlamard, the director of Fora, will talk to you about this repetitively. It is too expensive to remove the old buildings and the blight. That cost developers do not want to absorb. So it's cheaper. The remediation of planting new trees, even on MST, was a cheaper way to do it. So that has been the focus in the plan, especially with the redevelopment agency for the county. That's what Bill's group, corridor direct users, all of the groups, the environmental groups, Land Watch has been taking this stand for a generation almost, saying that, that's the wrong plan, that's the wrong approach. And the tide has changed, and I urge everybody to look at the base reassessment, the scoping report. Chapter 3 talks about the lack of need for this development. We don't need to develop this area. The population growth did not happen that was expected through 2015. The base reuse plan was saying, oh, we need houses, we need more commercial space, because there was an intended influx of population. They're not here. We don't need to build houses for them. There's no demand. The community now, and that's why we're approaching you over and over in all these seminars, is saying it's a new focus, it's going to be a lost opportunity, and as Bill pointed out, the base reuse plan is a regional plan when it was made in 1995. That BLM park was intended to draw perhaps a 50-mile radius in every direction. And Supervisor Potter said, yes, we met with Santa Cruz and San Benito counties when we developed this plan, because they were looking at a regional park. We've changed the character with a national monument. That is a material change to this base reuse plan that makes the plan obsolete. We are now looking at, we are the stewards of this land that we want the nation to come to. And shouldn't we look at this entire plan anew and decide, what do we do with this, not just for this 50-mile radius region and us, but for the world, because we only have it once. So that's really important. Now, to get to Janet's, right here, this is Marina, and those homes, 1,200 of them are going right in here, Marina Heights. When you drive along Engine Parkway, what you'll see is the green wrap, the green plastic wrap. Marina Heights, 1,200 homes, already approved. The developer came to the Marina City Council September 7th, 2 weeks ago, and asked for a 1-year extension. They have the rights, they put in the infrastructure, but they do not have a ground-up builder. They have no one to build upwards, to build the homes. The reason for that is, who are they going to sell them to? There's no demand for those homes. The 1-year extension was passed by the Marina City Council in total as a consent agenda, because the City of Marina, they can't afford to sustain the infrastructure up there. There's no funds in the accounts to continue to sustain that and take over and provide the support that's required. So the developer has a 1-year extension on that. The dunes coming off of Inner Garrison Road, the dunes, you see Target, Best Buy. Right next to Best Buy, there's plans for 10 theaters that is going to start in October. The difficulty there is that if you read the base reuse plan, as I read it, part of this was this corridor, the Highway 1 corridor. You should not see any development. It should have all been set back, but still remain on this blighted area, this area that's already scarred. There's plenty of room. But instead we drive down, and Marina's very proud of the colors, the paint colors. But you just see the signs. That did not need to occur, and we need to make sure that as the development happens on this blighted area, that we also make it that it's not visible as you go down the highway. You look to the right, you see the ocean. You look to the left, you should see the natural habitat. Because we're trying to get a nation to get off this freeway and drive in and come to our national monument. So the other homes, the dunes, next to there is housing also planned.
I do want to point out that I think it's important to see, I really appreciate what Gail shared, because there are a lot of us involved in this effort. And we certainly wouldn't want you to think that there's just one group involved. That's a whole coalition of us, and we certainly encourage your support too.
Could you recognize another candidate?
Sure, go ahead.
Jason Campbell.
Oh, Jason Campbell is running for Seaside City Council, so I'm sure he would be glad to chat with you also if you have questions. And Amy, do you want to stand up, Amy, so people can see you there? So Amy is here. She can answer questions about Land Watch. Let's see. First hand I saw was way back behind.
You designated about 7 areas that you want included in the National Monument.
Correct.
I was just wondering, of those areas, how many are in the phase reuse plan now are designated as development?
It's my understanding that they all are. I could, if I had the time here, I could pull up another map that shows you the development map, and I'm pretty sure you see every last one of them in there. Now, the plan doesn't always get updated that fast, so I may be wrong on something. Yeah?
And I wanted to extend some maybe assistance with the mapping, because I think it's really important that about 1,300 acres that you're showing as happy trails is actually designated as preserved areas already.
Thanks. I actually have what I got last year as the Habitat Conservation Plan map. One of the things, though, you have to admit on that, it shows all this development. And some of the stuff that people worked on, for example, the East Side Road, it shows some of the crossings. That plan seems to accept all this development. So I'm certainly not denigrating the conservation plan. I think it's a great idea. What we're talking about is how the development will affect both that habitat area and all the rest of it. George?
It seems to me the problem that we all have is a piecemeal approach to the properties. You know, each property has its own development interests and so on, but I'm wondering about the East Side Parkway. Isn't that more devastating, more relevant and devastating as an overall issue on the whole property?
Well, I think most of us in KeepFtOrdWild would agree with that.
My question would be, what's the status of that?
Well, you know what? There may be somebody here who's willing to answer that question far better than I can. I don't know. Is that something that you would like to take a stab at?
Very briefly, I'm Molly Erickson. Michael Stamp and I are the attorneys for KeepFtOrdWild. We, on behalf of KeepFtOrdWild, challenged an action that happened in 2011 with regard to the East Side Parkway. I'll keep it very short. Both the Fort Ord Reuse Authority and the county approved the alignment of the East Side Parkway, that red spine that you saw, that cutting through the center swath of the Happy Trails area. We challenged that approval under CEQA. We pointed out that the county and FORA had done no preliminary environmental review of the impacts of putting that roadway through that undeveloped area. That lawsuit is currently ongoing. Up until that point, the county and FORA had spent, from what we can estimate, about $400,000 developing exactly that roadway. And since then, the county has continued, and FORA has continued to spend, again, it probably looks like around another $200,000 developing that same roadway. The lawsuit continues.
Talking about lawsuits, and I want to go back to the blight situation. The KeepFtOrdWild, I understand, is in the midst of another lawsuit over the spending of over $90 million on cleanup, and yet the blight remains, and we're told there's no more cleanup going to be done. what's the status of that transparency issue, which concerns us all?
Well, Molly, would you like to stand up again?
Thanks, Molly Erickson for KeepFtOrdWild. And just briefly, one thing that I didn't mention about the East Side Parkway in response to your question earlier. The problem with the East Side Parkway is it creates infrastructure where there currently are no roads. It enables development. So people say, oh, it's just a road. No, it's a road that then enables development. You know, you've got this broad swath of road. Hey, we can build on both sides of it. So that's the concern behind it. The question about the Public Records Act, you may have seen coverage of this in the newspaper, in the Herald. The short version is this. KeepFtOrdWild members had heard that the Army and FORA had received, the Army had given FORA $100 million to spend on cleaning up a large area, some 3,400 acres approximately, of the Happy Trails area. Now, this was an area that the Army had responsibility for cleaning up, but they transferred that responsibility for ordnance and munitions cleanup to FORA in exchange for the $100 million. KeepFtOrdWild members were out there hiking and biking every day. They were wondering where that $100 million went. They didn't see any results on the ground. They would see people out there with shovels and the trucks periodically, but not $100 million worth. So as they asked the question of FORA, where did this go? Didn't get any answer. They asked our office for help. We asked the same question, didn't get anywhere. A month later, FORA kept trying to point me to somebody else's website, which didn't have the information, and I kept saying, there's somebody else, I want your records, and we want to see they don't have the information we're seeking. Eventually, it took about 2 months before FORA admitted to us what we've been told by somebody else, which is the majority of that $100 million went to buy an insurance policy. It's a special, what's called an environmental insurance policy. It doesn't operate in the same way that, you know, your typical homeowner's insurance policy, a car insurance policy that many of us are familiar with. It essentially acts as a trust. Money is held in trust by the insurance company, who then pays contractors to clean up the property. So we said, okay, you spent $87 million on the insurance policy. We'd like to see the policy. FORA's response, we don't have it. I thought they were joking. No, really, we'd like to see the policy. We don't have it, and we are only allowed to see it in the event of a claim. It was a secret policy. We said you can't spend $87 million of the public's money on a secret document. We sued. We waited weeks longer. We eventually sued, saying, look, this makes no sense. Within a matter of a couple of weeks, FORA started producing documents. We also want to know where that money went, not just where's the policy, but what did you spend it on? So as of today, we've received thousands and thousands of pages of documents, which is what we requested originally back in December of 2011. FORA discovered that it did have the policy after all. FORA found records. FORA forced its contractor to turn over records that we believe FORA had destroyed or lost in some way, shape, or form. The good news is that lawsuit is coming to an end. FORA just Friday, less than a week ago, turned over the remaining batch of documents which is also, again, thousands more pages, that we believe, and FORA believes, are the last remaining documents. So we're hoping to bring that litigation to a close.
Will we find out how that money was spent?
We do have information about how that money was spent now, yes. It is, FORA had never apparently asked for the specific details. They had been given documents, but they hadn't been tracking it in the kind of questions that people in this room would have. Who got the money? What was it for? And many of the documents we got still leave a lot of questions. One of the things, for example, we found out was that as soon as FORA got the $100 million, they immediately wrote a check for $3.5 million. Within days of getting the $100 million. FORA to this day cannot show where that $3.5 million, we know where it went, but what it went for. It went turned over to the contractor, Arcadis. I don't know if there's any Arcadis representatives here today. I know there's some other representatives for interests here. But Arcadis immediately then wrote a check to 2 of its contractors. To this day, no one can show us what actual work was done for that $3.5 billion, and FORA doesn't seem to care.
If I may, I'm Candy Ingram, and I'm a consultant, an independent consultant for the Corridor Reuse Authority. That's one of the items that I do. I simply would like to speak to my colleague for 1 second and let you know that The difficulty in any kind of response is that when there is litigation and you're asking questions, you are certainly in the position to put forth one set of information that I am not in a position to necessarily counter publicly. So I would ask that everyone here in this room understand that there are at least two sides to a story, and that there is a great deal of information that needs to be forthcoming, that needs to be presented. And I would ask that you look at factual information, not just my side or my spin or Molly's spin or whatever. We don't need to spin anything anymore. We need to have information that we share with each other. And I totally agree with that.
I think that's exactly what Keep Florida Wild has been about, transparency in records and documentation. And I think that's been a challenge. And I welcome a debate. I welcome documents out there. And that has been a challenge, as you would probably agree. Thank you.
Okay, we had another question up here. Yes.
What we haven't talked about is the huge elephant in this room, and that is the Seaside City Council. When I read in the papers, they're going to deliver to the candidate if this racetrack under jurisdiction of Seaside, maybe it already is, and they're going to approve it. Then what happens? There'll be the lawsuits from environmental groups, and 10, 15 years later, it'll happen.
Well, trying to think of how to respond to that. Yes, I'm from Seaside, and we've been going to the Seaside City Council meetings and speaking out about our concerns. And as far as I can tell, the city of Seaside is going right ahead. And I guess keep following things in the papers. Come to our city council meetings if you want some interesting debate and very emotional also at times. Yeah.
I'm just afraid it'll end up like the hotel.
Well, we'll see. Yes.
Bill, partly responding to that question, it requires a lot of it still requires annexation. So
Right.
It has to go before the Local Agency Formation Commission. And it may very well not be able to meet the criteria for annexing the property. So there are a number of arenas that have yet to be addressed in that.
You almost make my point.
Yeah. I would encourage you, if for interest's sake, come to the Seaside City Council meetings, the forum meetings, read the paper, and you'll know as much as anybody, and that may not feel like a lot. I don't know. Yes?
I'm wondering where the appetite is for a horse track out there. A racetrack. Who's pushing that?
He's standing right back there by the door. He's waving to you. He's the man you should speak with.
I think, we'd be happy to present and let you guys see what it's all about and go and answer all your questions and let you see what our whole program is about and whether you like or don't like it. We're more than happy to present so you see both sides of the entire issue.
Yes?
Where is water for all the proposed development?
We have some people that know a lot more than I do in the room. I don't know if George might want to speak or Jan. I don't know if Amy might know something about that.
Janet Brennan's kind of an expert.
Janet Brennan may. Yeah, I'm not the one to answer that question.
It's a complex. And I'm trying to. There probably is insufficient water within the seaside or county allocation for. First, the Fort reuse plan basically says that they can allocate 6,000 or 6,600 acre feet of water, and most of that has already been allocated. So there's insufficient, as I recall, insufficient water within the county's allocation or Seaside's allocation to do that. Seaside has the potential of taking Bayonet Golf Course off the water from Fort Ord and possibly using it for that particular project. That hasn't been decided, but that's an option. Marina has just recently talked about a desal plant for 3,000 acre-feet of water. That could be a potential source. But the Fort reuse plan basically says if they go beyond 6,600 or 6,000 units, they have to do a total reassessment that may be occurring. But the potential is there for the city of Seaside, Marina Coast Water District, to provide water as well. Now, Marina Coast Water District, during the whole debate over the regional project, was going to end up with 1,700 acre-feet of water. It basically said it didn't need that water. We're just doing it for our friends on the Monterey Peninsula. And now the recent effort is to go ahead with a 3,000 acre-foot desal plant. So there are a number of options out there, but under the current designation of allocation of water, I don't think the water is there. George?
I don't want to say that the water on the Flora is different than the water problem on the peninsula. They are two separate issues.
Yeah.
Essentially separate.
The water basically for Flora development comes out of the Salinas Valley groundwater basin, but it is constrained by the Fort reuse plan, which basically said there was only enough water for 600 acre feet, I think. And so there are various efforts by Marina Coast Water District to enhance that, and perhaps by the city of Seaside to use some of its water that it's currently potable water and putting the golf course on recycled waters.
Thank you, Janet. We've really come to near the end of our time. I urge any of you who have not had your questions answered to stick around. There's some good people here who will, I'm sure, be willing to answer them. I want to announce that our handbook is ready for all the members who haven't already got it in your hands. Tamara has the handbooks here. Please come and get your handbooks. I want to thank Bill Weigel and KeepFtOrdWild for this excellent presentation.
Thank you.